Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, Professor Dr. Reinhardt, for this nice introduction. Actually, I want to ask you first a question. Do you know which ultraviolet index we have now here today in Stockholm? Probably not. Right, because we are here within a building and we don't think about ultraviolet radiation. But this is the main topic of my today's talk, where I want to introduce you to the so-called generation and extraction system for individual exposure, shortly abbreviated Genesis UV, where my research team collected the exposure data for ultraviolet radiation in the occupational context, but also for some leisure time exposure. To give you a short reminder what ultraviolet radiation is, it is a main component of the solar radiation spectrum and ranges from 100 to 400 nanometers. This is a very short wavelength and therefore also highly energetic, and has also a high potential for damage, especially of the skin or the eyes. This solar radiation spectrum can be subdivided into 3 different spectra depending on their different wavelengths, which are UVA, B, or C radiation. And the natural source of UV radiation is basically our sun, but not all of the emitted radiation is reaching our Earth's surface, visible over here within this picture. So we see that ultraviolet C radiation gets completely absorbed by our ozone layer. For ultraviolet B radiation, up to 90% are absorbed and only the residual 10% is reaching the Earth's surface. And for ultraviolet A radiation, there is actually no absorption, so the complete radiation is reaching the Earth's surface in its full intensity. And with this nice picture, you also see how important the ozone layer is for the radiation. If we have a decrease in the ozone layer, the radiation would highly increase. Now I want to talk to you about the risk assessment and prevention. We heard a nice talk yesterday about risk assessment and that they have to meet different criteria. We have the medical evidence that ultraviolet radiation is causing skin cancer. We have the epidemiological evidence that there is a correlation for some non-melanoma skin cancer entities, that the higher the ultraviolet radiation exposure, the higher is the risk that you get skin cancer when you're older. And this is also the reason why we have in Germany since 2015 some skin cancer entities admitted to the list of occupational diseases, abbreviated in our language BK5103. And since then, the reports and recognition processes are constantly increasing. But what is still missing, or was missing since our study, were some exposure data to analyze which occupations are at a particular risk for getting maybe skin cancer at the end of their lifetime, after their job. And we wanted to close this gap with a large-scale measurement. This is the Genesis UV study. For this, we first started within Germany. The study was conducted from 2014 to 2019, and the measurement term was from the beginning of April to the end of October. And we worked with 1,000 test persons. They were wearing this small electronic data logger dosimeter on their left arm for the whole working day. And the measurement frequency was 1 per second. So every second, the dosimeter is able to measure ultraviolet A and B radiation. The data was then mobile or wireless transferred every time the dosimeter was connected to a tablet PC, and they were all summarized at our own institute, so data collection and analysis took place over there. And as you can imagine, with a measurement frequency of 1 per second, we generated roughly 3.7 billion data sets, and they were summarized into 267 occupations and occupational activity groups. And for example, you have 47,000 full days of measurement with the highest quality. Our results are given in the standard erythema dose. Therefore, I would want to shortly introduce this term to you. It is a quantity which specifies the biologically effective irradiation. So it measures the amount of radiation that is able to cause a sunburn on the human skin. 1 SED equals to 100 joules per square meter, but what does it mean for the human being? Over here, I want to show you the power of magnitude for a complete week, measured in the summer term of July. And we nicely see, for example, the Monday has a high SED values up to 3.8, while, for example, the SED exposure on this Friday was relatively low with just 1.1. But nevertheless, we see we have no constant exposure, neither during the day or during the week. So you have to take this into account basically every day. And this is also the reason why we have every day a new ultraviolet index. The results of this study are already published. The main report is actually only in German, but there are also some other studies which you can look into, which are then written in English. Now coming to the results, I just want to highlight the occupations with the highest exposure. Those values are the extrapolated annual exposure values given in SED. And for example, we see that the drilling leader over here has the highest UV exposure of all different professions with 579 SEDs per year, followed by the quarry worker. And for example, we also find the roofer or the bricklayer person within this evaluation. And if you calculate this down to daily mean exposure values, they are ranging from 1.9 SEDs up to 2.5 SEDs. And with this, you see that the higher the SED value, of course, the higher is the need that those people are taking protective measures during their day, during their working day. And for example, this then depends on the skin type actually. If you have reddish hair and a very pale skin, you're belonging to the skin type 1, and there already 1 SED per day would be able to cause you a sunburn if you are not protected. Have you any idea if there is maybe a limit value suggestion for SEDs? There is actually one, which is 1 SED per day, according to the World Health Organization. And if you calculate this up, this would correspond to roughly 230 working days. And if you then look at our occupations with the highest exposure, this 230 would be roughly around there. So those people who are working within these professions are exceeding this limit value suggestion by far. And now I shortly want to introduce you also to our average leisure time UV exposure measurements. They were done based on a statistical evaluation of the average time used from the Federal Statistical Office, abbreviated over here. And there we get our data from which leisure time activities are performed every day at which time point, and then we measured also with our data logger dosimeter the individual UV exposure. And in total, we summarize this up. So you have an average German person has a daily mean total of 0.67 SEDs. And if you would then extrapolate this to an annual value, you are roughly around 247 SEDs for yearly exposure. So you are relatively within this limit of the World Health Organization of 230 SEDs. Yeah, realities in prevention. Actually, this is what we all dream of, a person at work, perfectly covered and protected. This is what we actually find most of the times. But to sum it up, so with the Genesis UV study, we were able to identify the occupations which are particularly at risk. This is mainly important for the prevention. If you consider the occupational disease, we are now able to make these recognition processes tailored to the individual person, if they work full-time or part-time, if they maybe change their jobs during their lifetime. And we also want to make a dose-response relationship for the basal cell carcinoma with the help of our data, because there it is not clear which UV exposure is then, or which, how to say, which exposure frequency is necessary to cause basal cell carcinoma. And if you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact either me or my colleague over here. But now I'm very happy to answer your questions you might have now. Thank you very much.